Have you ever noticed how one person can say the same idea you said, and suddenly everyone listens? Same words, different reaction. That's not luck. That's authority psychology, and once you understand it, you'll realize authority isn't something you have. It's something people grant you in real time. Here's the surprising part. Authority isn't mainly built through power. It's built through signals, tiny cues your brain reads instantly. Certainty, boundaries, calmness, competence, and even silence. And most people accidentally signal the opposite without realizing it, which is why they get interrupted, overlooked, or talked over, even when they're capable. In the next 2 minutes, I'll break down the psychology of authority. What makes people respect you? What quietly makes them doubt you? And how to carry yourself with presence without becoming arrogant. If you want more psychology that changes how you show up in life, like this, subscribe and share it with someone who deserves to be taken seriously. Chapter 1. Where authority really comes from. Authority is felt before it is named. It enters a room ahead of titles, uniforms, or credentials. You recognize it instantly in certain people, even when they say very little. Others can shout orders, display symbols of power, and still struggle to be taken seriously. This difference reveals a truth most never fully confront. Authority is not granted. It is perceived. From the earliest moments of human interaction, people scan for signals. They look for certainty, coherence, and emotional stability. They listen not just to words, but to posture, pace, tone, and restraint. Authority forms in this silent evaluation long before any explicit command is given. Those who understand this shape outcomes effortlessly. Those who do not rely on force and wonder why resistance follows. There is a story of a young officer entering a seasoned unit for the first time. He had rank on his side but no history with the group. Instead of asserting control, he observed. He listened. He spoke only when necessary and followed through on every decision without drama. Within weeks, the unit treated his words as final. Another officer with the same rank tried to dominate from day one and spent months fighting quiet defiance. Rank was equal. Authority was not. The psychology of authority begins with internal alignment. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions point in the same direction, people feel it. There is no leakage of doubt, no contradiction between what you say and how you behave. This coherence is rare, and rarity draws attention. People trust what feels whole. Many chase authority by trying to appear powerful. They raise their voice, interrupt others, assert opinions aggressively, and cling to control. These behaviors often signal the opposite of authority. They reveal insecurity, urgency, and the need to be validated. True authority has no need to prove itself in every moment. Consider the difference between someone who commands silence by demanding it and someone who commands silence simply by beginning to speak. The second does not compete for attention. Attention moves toward them. This happens because people sense that listening will be worthwhile. Authority creates gravity. Authority also emerges from comfort with responsibility. People trust those who do not avoid difficult decisions. Hesitation is sometimes necessary, but chronic indecision erodes confidence. When someone can weigh complexity, choose a direction, and stand by it calmly, others relax. They no longer feel the burden of uncertainty pressing on them. There is a leader who once said that people do not fear strong decisions. They fear weak conviction. Even an unpopular choice, when delivered with clarity and ownership, stabilizes a group. Ambiguity destabilizes far more than firmness ever could. Another core element of authority is emotional regulation. When pressure rises, authority shows itself in steadiness. Anyone can appear confident when conditions are easy. Authority is revealed when stakes are high and emotions run hot. The individual who remains composed becomes a reference point. Others unconsciously orient themselves around that stability. Think of a pilot during turbulence. Passengers watch every movement, every announcement, every pause, calm voice, measured actions, no unnecessary explanations. Anxiety decreases even though the situation has not changed. Authority is not about removing danger. It is about removing panic. Consistency reinforces authority over time. When behavior is predictable in principle, not rigid in action, trust grows. People know what you tolerate, what you value, and what you will enforce. They do not waste energy testing limits repeatedly. They adjust. This is why authority and boundaries are inseparable. A person with no clear limits invites confusion. A person whose limits shift with mood invites manipulation. Authority rests on the quiet confidence of knowing where you stand and acting accordingly. Authority is also shaped by how you treat others when you have the upper hand. Those who humiliate, dismiss, or exploit weaken their own position. Fear may produce short-term compliance, but it erodes long-term loyalty. Respect, once lost, is difficult to regain. There is an executive who made a habit of giving credit publicly and addressing mistakes privately. Over time, employees worked harder not out of fear, but out of pride. Authority rooted in respect creates voluntary alignment. People want to contribute rather than merely comply. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Another overlooked source of authority is restraint, knowing when not to speak, knowing when not to intervene. Constant involvement signals mistrust. Strategic absence signals confidence. When you do step in, it carries weight. This does not mean disengagement. It means selective engagement. Authority grows when your presence matters because it is not constant. Scarcity sharpens attention. Authority is also influenced by self-respect. When you tolerate disrespect, dismiss your own standards, or betray your values for approval, people notice. They may not articulate it, but they adjust their behavior accordingly. Authority weakens from the inside out. This is why internal discipline precedes external influence. You cannot demand seriousness if you treat your own commitments casually. You cannot command respect if you negotiate your principles under pressure. Authority is a reflection of how you govern yourself. There is a quiet strength in saying no without apology, not with hostility, not with explanation, simply with clarity. This signals that your decisions are considered, not reactive. People may not like every boundary, but they respect the certainty behind it. Authority also requires comfort with solitude. Those who constantly seek consensus dilute their influence. While collaboration matters, authority accepts that leadership sometimes means standing alone. The willingness to be temporarily misunderstood in service of long-term direction separates leaders from followers. Observe how people react when someone with real authority enters a space. Conversations shift. Body language adjusts. Not because of fear, but because attention recognizes competence and stability. This reaction cannot be forced. It must be earned. As this chapter settles, allow these ideas to move beyond abstraction. Notice the moments when authority is felt without being announced. Notice how coherence, calm, and consistency shape perception. Reflect on the signals you send when pressure rises, when decisions must be made, and when respect is tested. Let these reflections work quietly, because authority is not something you turn on. It is something you become, moment by disciplined moment, until others recognize it without being told. Chapter 2. The signals people obey authority does not begin with commands but with signals. In the previous chapter, authority was revealed as something perceived rather than granted, built through coherence, calm, and consistency. Now the focus narrows to the silent language that people respond to instinctively, often without realizing why. Long before anyone decides whether to follow you, they are reading you. Your posture speaks before your words. Your pace communicates confidence or uncertainty. Your stillness reveals more authority than restless movement ever could. These signals operate below conscious thought, yet they shape decisions with remarkable precision. Consider two individuals entering the same room. One moves quickly, scanning faces, adjusting clothing, filling space with motion. The other walks steadily, unhurried, aware of their surroundings without reacting to them. Neither has spoken. Yet one already feels reactive, the other grounded. People do not analyze this difference. They feel it and they respond accordingly. One of the strongest signals of authority is comfort with silence. Silence suggests that you are not dependent on constant validation or noise to exist in the space. When you speak after silence, your words carry weight because they are not competing for attention. Those who rush to fill every gap communicate internal urgency, even when their message is sound. Eye contact is another signal, not in its intensity but in its steadiness. Authority does not stare to dominate, nor does it avoid to appease. It meets attention calmly and releases it naturally. This balance communicates confidence without aggression, presence without threat. Movement matters more than most realize. Efficient movement signals decisiveness. Excessive motion signals nervous energy. Authority moves with purpose. There is no wasted gesture, no unnecessary display. Even when still, there is intention. Voice is often misunderstood. Authority is not loudness, it is control. A controlled voice does not rush. It does not spike emotionally. It does not strain to persuade. When volume increases, it does so deliberately. When it lowers, people lean in. This command of range creates attention without force. There is a courtroom judge who rarely raises his voice. When he does, the room freezes. The power is not in the volume, it is in the contrast. Because restraint has been consistent, deviation carries meaning. Those who shout regularly lose this leverage. Another signal people obey is certainty of direction. This does not mean having all the answers. It means knowing the next step. People become uneasy around those who speak in circles, hedge excessively, or constantly revise positions. Authority clarifies direction, even when the destination remains uncertain. Certainty is not arrogance. It is commitment to a course of action with the willingness to adjust later if needed. This commitment relieves others of decision paralysis. They know where to place their effort. Appearance also communicates authority, not through luxury or status symbols, but through order, clean lines, consistency, appropriateness for the environment. Sloppiness signals lack of care. Over-ornamentation signals insecurity. Authority appears intentional, not decorative. Another powerful signal is emotional containment. When something goes wrong, people watch closely. Do you react, deflect, blame, or center yourself? The one who remains composed becomes the anchor. Others unconsciously look to them for cues on how serious the situation is. There was a production manager whose factory line broke down unexpectedly. Instead of reacting, he paused, observed, and spoke calmly. The team followed suit. Repairs were made faster, not because of urgency, but because panic never took over. Authority kept the system functional. Authority also shows itself in how you handle contradiction. Those who react defensively to challenge signal fragility. Those who listen fully, consider the input, and respond thoughtfully signal strength. You do not lose authority by being questioned. You lose it by being threatened by questions. Boundaries reinforce these signals. When you allow interruptions, disrespect, or chaos to continue unchecked, you signal that your presence does not require order. When you calmly restore structure, you signal that standards exist. This restoration does not require anger. It requires consistency. People obey authority they can predict. Predictability does not mean rigidity. It means reliability. When reactions are proportionate and decisions are aligned with stated values, trust forms. Trust is the soil in which authority grows. Another subtle signal is patience. Impatience communicates scarcity, as if time or control might be lost at any moment. Patience communicates abundance. It suggests that you are not afraid of delay because you are confident in outcome. This calm reassures others. Authority also appears in how you distribute attention. When you listen fully to one person at a time without distraction, you communicate value. People feel seen, and when people feel seen, they become more cooperative. Attention is a form of currency. Authority spends it deliberately. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Another signal people obey is follow through. Words without action erode authority faster than silence ever could. When you say something will happen and it does, even in small matters, credibility accumulates. When promises dissolve, authority leaks away quietly. This is why restraint in commitment matters. Authority does not overpromise. It chooses carefully and delivers reliably. People would rather have fewer assurances they can trust than many they cannot. Even humor plays a role. Authority uses humor sparingly and never to undermine itself. Self-deprecation can build rapport, but excessive self-dismissal weakens perceived competence. Authority balances warmth with gravity. Over time, these signals combine into an impression that is difficult to name but easy to feel. People adjust their behavior around you. They prepare more carefully. They listen more closely. They test less often. This adjustment is not demanded. It is offered. As this chapter draws to a close, let attention settle on the signals you send without realizing it. Notice your pace, your stillness, your tone, and your follow-through. Notice how people respond before you speak and after you leave. Authority is not hidden in grand gestures. It lives in these small, repeatable signals that the human mind reads instantly. When aligned deliberately, they create a presence that others naturally recognize and respect. Chapter 3. Why people follow or resist authority reveals itself not only in who follows, but in who resists and why. In the chapters so far, authority has been established as perception shaped by coherence, calm, and clear signals. Now the deeper psychological layer comes into view because resistance is not random. It is patterned, predictable, and deeply human. People do not resist authority itself. They resist how authority makes them feel. When authority threatens identity, autonomy, or dignity, resistance appears almost automatically. When authority provides safety, direction, and fairness, resistance fades, even when demands are high. Understanding this distinction changes everything. There is a common mistake made by those in positions of power. They assume resistance means defiance, laziness, or lack of discipline. In reality, resistance often signals uncertainty, fear, or a perceived loss of control. When this signal is misread, authority responds with pressure. Pressure intensifies resistance. The cycle hardens. Think of a workplace where a new process is introduced without explanation or involvement. Even if the process is efficient, people push back. Not because they hate improvement, but because the change arrived without respect for their agency. Contrast this with a leader who frames the same change as a shared problem-solving effort. Resistance drops. The outcome changes not because the decision changed, but because the psychological experience did. Authority that ignores human psychology relies on compliance. Authority that understands it earns cooperation. One of the strongest drivers of resistance is unpredictability. When people cannot anticipate reactions, they protect themselves. They withhold effort, information, and initiative. When authority figures are emotionally inconsistent, people stay guarded. They do the minimum required and wait for signals of safety. Predictable authority, on the other hand, lowers defenses. When responses are proportionate and grounded, people stop bracing. Energy once spent on self-protection becomes available for contribution. This shift is subtle but transformative. Another source of resistance is humiliation, even in mild forms. Public correction, sarcasm, dismissive tone, or being talked over may seem insignificant to the authority figure. To the recipient, it signals threat. Once dignity feels at risk, logic shuts down. Resistance becomes self-defense. There was a supervisor who corrected mistakes publicly to save time. Productivity dropped. Errors increased. Morale collapsed. When corrections were moved to private conversations delivered calmly, performance recovered. Authority was restored not by tightening control, but by restoring dignity. People also resist authority that feels arbitrary. When rules exist without rationale, enforcement feels personal rather than principled. Authority strengthens when standards are clear and applied consistently. Even strict rules are accepted when they are fair and predictable. Fairness does not require agreement. It requires transparency. People will tolerate outcomes they dislike if they believe the process was just. They will rebel against outcomes they like if they believe the process was corrupt. Authority lives or dies on this perception. Another psychological trigger of resistance is forced urgency. When everything is treated as critical, nothing is. Constant pressure exhausts people and dulls responsiveness. Authority that calibrates urgency earns credibility. When something truly matters, people respond because the signal is rare and trusted. There is also resistance born from invisibility. When effort goes unnoticed and contribution feels unseen, disengagement follows. Authority does not require constant praise, but it does require acknowledgement. Recognition signals that attention exists. Attention signals value. Value sustains motivation. Authority figures often underestimate how closely people watch their reactions to mistakes. When errors are met with blame, people hide them. When errors are met with inquiry, people surface them. The second environment produces learning. The first produces silence. Authority thrives in learning environments. Resistance can also come from over-control. When every detail is managed, people stop thinking. Initiative disappears. Authority becomes a bottleneck. Paradoxically, releasing control in appropriate areas strengthens authority overall. It communicates trust. Trust is not given blindly. It is extended deliberately. When people feel trusted, they rise to meet expectations. When they feel monitored excessively, they withdraw effort. Authority that balances oversight with autonomy creates resilience rather than dependence. There is a military unit known for discipline and adaptability. Orders are clear. Standards are high. Yet within those boundaries, individuals are empowered to make decisions. This balance reduces resistance because people feel both guided and respected. Authority also falters when it competes for dominance rather than direction. When leaders argue to win instead of decide, they invite challenge. When they listen to decide, they earn alignment. People want direction more than debate. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Another subtle cause of resistance is incongruence. When words and actions do not match, authority erodes quietly. People may not confront the inconsistency, but they adjust their trust. Once trust drops, resistance grows passively through disengagement. This is why modeling behavior matters more than enforcing it. Authority that lives its standards needs fewer reminders. Authority that violates them invites constant challenge. There is also resistance rooted in identity threat. When authority communicates, even unintentionally, that someone is replaceable, inadequate, or irrelevant, defenses rise. Authority that reinforces purpose and role reduces this threat. People work harder when they know where they belong. Authority is not about eliminating resistance entirely. Some resistance is healthy. It surfaces blind spots and prevents rigidity. The goal is not obedience. The goal is alignment. Alignment comes from clarity, fairness, and emotional intelligence. Over time, authority that understands resistance becomes adaptive rather than rigid. It listens without surrendering direction. It adjusts without losing coherence. This flexibility signals strength, not weakness. As this chapter settles, allow attention to rest on the moments when resistance appears and what it might be signaling beneath the surface. Notice how predictability, dignity, fairness, and trust shape willingness to follow. Notice how pressure and inconsistency invite pushback. Let these reflections sharpen awareness, because authority deepens not by overpowering resistance, but by understanding it well enough to dissolve what is unnecessary and engage what is useful. Chapter 4. Authority without force. Up to this point, authority has been revealed as perception shaped by coherence, signals, and psychological safety, with resistance understood as a reaction to threat rather than defiance. Authority has emerged not as domination, but as stability that others orient toward. Now the focus sharpens on one of the most misunderstood truths of power. The strongest authority rarely needs to force anything. Force creates movement, but authority creates direction. Force can make people comply, but authority makes them align. The difference is not philosophical, it is practical. Compliance lasts only as long as pressure is applied. Alignment continues even when you are not present. Force shows up in many forms: raised voices, repeated reminders, escalating consequences. Emotional pressure disguised as urgency. These tactics work in the short term and fail in the long term. They exhaust the person applying them and harden the people receiving them. Authority without force produces the opposite effect. It conserves energy and builds momentum. There is a manager who never threatens consequences. Instead, expectations are clear, standards are visible, and follow-through is consistent. When performance slips, the conversation is calm and direct. The question is never why did you fail, but what broke in the process. Over time, his team polices itself. Force becomes unnecessary because authority has been internalized. Force signals doubt. It suggests that without pressure, things will fall apart. Authority signals confidence. It suggests that standards exist and will be upheld, with or without emotional intensity. People trust the second far more than the first. One of the key reasons force backfires is psychological reactance. When people feel controlled, they instinctively push back to reclaim autonomy. This reaction is not logical. It is biological. The more pressure applied, the stronger the internal resistance becomes. Authority that respects autonomy bypasses this response entirely. Respecting autonomy does not mean avoiding direction. It means offering direction without stripping dignity. It means framing expectations as shared commitments rather than imposed burdens. People are more willing to carry weight they feel they chose to lift. Language plays a critical role here. Statements framed as ultimatums invite defiance. Statements framed as clarity invite cooperation. The difference is subtle but powerful. One threatens identity, the other affirms it. There is a leader who never says you have to. He says this is what we are doing and this is why. The direction is firm. The reasoning is transparent. The result is buy-in without debate. People may not love every decision, but they respect the process. Authority without force also relies on patience. Not hesitation, but patience. The ability to allow time for adjustment without retreating from standards. Many people apply force because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of waiting. Authority tolerates this discomfort because it trusts the system it has built. This patience is often misread as softness by those who equate loudness with strength. Yet over time, results speak louder than tone. Teams led without force outperform those driven by fear, not because they are nicer, but because they are more stable. Another pillar of authority without force is consequence without emotion. Consequences are inevitable in any structured environment. The difference lies in delivery. Emotional consequences feel personal. Neutral consequences feel procedural. People accept procedures more readily than punishments. A referee in a high-stakes game does not argue. The call is made. The game continues. The authority of the referee does not come from persuasion. It comes from consistency and acceptance of the role. Emotionless enforcement preserves legitimacy. Authority weakens when consequences are delayed, inconsistent, or dramatic. It strengthens when consequences are predictable and proportional. People adjust behavior quickly when patterns are clear. Authority without force also requires trust in others' capacity. Micromanagement is a form of force. It communicates that without constant oversight, failure is expected. This erodes confidence and initiative. Authority communicates belief in competence and intervenes only when necessary. There is a project leader who sets clear goals and then steps back. Progress is checked at agreed points. Problems are addressed when surfaced, not hunted. The team grows more capable over time because responsibility is real. Authority becomes a framework, not a cage. Another dimension is emotional neutrality in disagreement. When challenged, force reacts. Authority listens, not to appease but to understand. Understanding does not equal concession. It equals information. Information strengthens decisions. People are far more likely to accept an outcome they disagree with if they believe they were heard. Authority that listens disarms opposition without yielding control. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Authority without force also knows when to disengage. Not every challenge requires response. Not every provocation deserves attention. Selective engagement preserves authority by preventing dilution. When you respond to everything, nothing carries weight. Silence used correctly is not avoidance, it is signal. It communicates that you are not reactive, not threatened, and not dependent on constant assertion. When you do speak, the contrast restores gravity. Another subtle trap is over-explaining. Excessive justification signals uncertainty. Authority states, then clarifies if necessary. It does not plead its case. People sense the difference immediately. This does not mean being cold or distant. Warmth and authority are not opposites. The most respected figures combine approachability with firmness. They are human without being chaotic. They are kind without being permissive. Authority without force also survives scrutiny. It does not fear questions because it is grounded in principle. When asked why, it answers calmly. When challenged unfairly, it holds steady. This steadiness becomes reputation. Over time, people begin to self-correct around authority like this. Norms emerge. Standards are upheld socially rather than imposed constantly. The group becomes stronger than any single enforcement action. Force demands obedience. Authority earns it. Force creates dependency. Authority creates capability. Force escalates conflict. Authority absorbs it and redirects. As this chapter comes to rest, allow attention to settle on where force sneaks into your interactions. Notice moments of urgency, pressure, or emotional leverage. Notice what happens when you remove them and replace them with clarity, consistency, and calm. Authority without force is not quieter because it is weak. It is quieter because it does not need to shout to be heard. Chapter 5. The shadow side of authority. Authority, when grounded and disciplined, stabilizes people and systems. Up to this point, it has been explored as perception, signaling, psychological alignment, and influence without force. Now attention turns to what happens when authority drifts out of alignment, because every form of power casts a shadow, and ignoring it is how authority collapses. The shadow side of authority emerges when control replaces clarity. It begins quietly, a small tolerance for cutting corners, a habit of dismissing dissent. a growing belief that outcomes justify methods. None of these feel dangerous at first. They feel efficient. Over time, they corrode trust from the inside. Authority becomes dangerous when it stops being self-regulated. The moment someone believes they are exempt from the standards they enforce, authority fractures. People may continue to comply, but respect drains away. What remains is fear, silence, or passive resistance. There is a leader who once inspired loyalty through fairness and composure. As success grew, so did impatience. Feedback became irritation. Questions became obstacles. Eventually, people stopped speaking honestly. Mistakes multiplied. The leader believed competence had declined. In reality, psychological safety had vanished. Unchecked authority distorts perception. It narrows attention. It filters information to confirm existing beliefs. Dissent is seen as threat rather than signal. Over time, decision quality degrades because reality is no longer reaching the top. History is filled with examples of authority that failed not because it lacked power, but because it lacked restraint. The most catastrophic errors are often made by those surrounded by agreement, not opposition. Silence becomes the most dangerous feedback loop. Another shadow emerges when authority becomes identity rather than role. When someone confuses who they are with the position they hold, any challenge feels personal. Ego replaces purpose. Decisions are made to protect status rather than serve outcomes. Authority rooted in identity becomes brittle. It cannot adapt without feeling diminished. It cannot listen without feeling threatened. This brittleness eventually leads to collapse, either through rebellion, irrelevance, or self-destruction. There is also the temptation to use authority to avoid discomfort. Instead of addressing complexity, authority can shut it down. Instead of sitting with uncertainty, authority can impose certainty prematurely. This feels decisive, but it often creates larger problems later. Premature certainty is a hallmark of insecure authority. Secure authority can say, "We do not know yet," and still maintain confidence. It understands that patience is not weakness and that credibility grows when honesty replaces pretense. Another shadow appears in selective enforcement. When rules apply to some but not others, authority loses moral ground. Favoritism, even when subtle, is quickly noticed. People may not confront it openly, but they adjust their effort and trust accordingly. Consistency is not rigidity. It is fairness over time. Authority that bends rules for convenience erodes legitimacy faster than authority that enforces unpopular standards evenly. There is also the misuse of charisma. Charisma can amplify authority, but it can also mask flaws. Charismatic authority can override critical thinking, both in others and in itself. When charm replaces substance, accountability weakens. The danger is not charisma itself, but reliance on it. Authority that depends on personality rather than principle becomes unstable. When mood shifts or circumstances change, influence evaporates. Another shadow is emotional contagion. Authority figures set emotional tone. When they are anxious, angry, or cynical, it spreads rapidly. When they are grounded, calm spreads just as quickly. Many underestimate how their private emotional state becomes public through subtle behavior. This is why self-awareness is not optional for authority. Blind spots become amplified. Unresolved issues leak into decisions. Authority without inner work eventually externalizes its chaos. There is a commander who required regular self-review from his senior staff. Not performance review, but behavioral review. How did we handle pressure? Where did we react instead of respond? This practice prevented the slow drift into arrogance and preserved authority over time. Authority must also guard against isolation. As authority increases, feedback often decreases. People assume you already know, or they fear consequences. Without deliberate structures for truth to travel upward, authority becomes disconnected. Isolation creates illusion. Illusion creates error. Error creates fallout. Authority that invites feedback protects itself. Another shadow is overextension. Authority figures who try to control everything burn out and lose effectiveness. Fatigue reduces judgment. Irritation increases. Small issues become triggers. Authority begins to feel volatile. Sustainable authority delegates, trusts, and rests. It understands limits. It protects its own capacity so that presence remains stable when it matters most. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. The shadow side of authority is not something to eliminate. It is something to manage. Awareness brings choice. Choice preserves integrity. Authority that acknowledges its shadow becomes stronger, not weaker. The most respected authority figures are not those without flaws, but those who correct themselves quickly. They notice drift and realign. They accept responsibility without drama. They repair trust when it is strained. This ability to self-correct is the mark of mature authority. It signals that power is held, not clutched. It reassures others that authority serves something larger than itself. As this chapter draws to a close, let attention turn inward. Notice where authority might drift when unexamined. Notice where impatience, ego, or certainty could replace clarity and restraint. Let these reflections remain active, because authority that is not watched eventually watches over nothing. The psychology of authority is not only about influence over others, but about discipline over oneself, especially when no one else is in a position to challenge you. Chapter 6. Stewarding authority. For the long game across these chapters, authority has been revealed as perception shaped by coherence, signals, psychological safety, influence without force, and the discipline to face its shadow. Authority has emerged not as domination, but as stewardship, something held carefully and expressed deliberately. Now everything converges into the long view, because authority that endures is not built for moments, but for decades. The final evolution of authority is responsibility without attachment. You carry weight without being consumed by it. You lead without needing to be seen leading. You influence without gripping outcomes tightly. This is the difference between authority that flashes and authority that lasts. Enduring authority is grounded in service to something larger than ego. Not service in the sentimental sense, but service to standards, purpose, and long-term outcomes. When authority serves only the self, it eventually collapses inward. When it serves a mission, it becomes resilient. There is a quiet shift that happens when authority matures. You stop asking whether people respect you and start asking whether the system functions when you are not present. True authority builds structures, habits, and cultures that operate without constant intervention. When you step away and things hold, authority has succeeded. This requires letting go of visibility. Many confuse authority with being central. In reality, the strongest authority decentralizes. It distributes clarity. It empowers judgment. It allows others to carry responsibility and grow into it. This multiplication of competence is the ultimate measure of influence. A seasoned leader once said that their goal was to become less necessary over time. Not irrelevant, but unnecessary for daily stability. When this happened, they knew authority had shifted from personality to principle. The organization no longer depended on mood or presence. It depended on shared understanding. Authority for the long game also requires emotional longevity. Burned-out authority becomes brittle. Cynical authority becomes corrosive. Sustainable authority protects its internal state with the same seriousness it protects external standards. Rest, reflection, and renewal are not luxuries. They are maintenance. This maintenance includes revisiting values regularly, not as slogans but as lived criteria for decision-making. When pressure mounts, values are tested. Authority that bends quietly under pressure loses shape. Authority that holds values consistently becomes a stabilizing force others rely on. There will be moments when holding values costs popularity. This is inevitable. Authority that seeks constant approval sacrifices direction. Authority that tolerates temporary discomfort in service of long-term alignment earns deeper trust. People may resist in the moment, but they remember integrity later. Another element of long-term authority is adaptability without identity loss. Conditions change. Contexts shift. Strategies evolve. Authority that clings to old methods out of pride stagnates. Authority that adapts while preserving core principles stays relevant. This balance requires humility and discernment. Humility here does not mean self-doubt. It means openness to correction. Authority that can say this needs adjustment without collapsing sends a powerful signal. It tells others that growth is allowed and that learning does not stop at the top. Long-term authority also understands succession. It prepares others to lead. It does not hoard knowledge or control. It creates pathways. This generosity strengthens authority rather than diminishing it. Those who grow under you carry your influence forward. There is a teacher whose former students lead across many fields. When asked about their legacy, the teacher spoke not of achievements but of people who surpassed them. Authority measured this way becomes expansive rather than fragile. Another mark of enduring authority is restraint in crisis. When chaos rises, authority does not add noise. It simplifies. It prioritizes. It communicates what matters now and what can wait. This clarity prevents overwhelm and preserves momentum. Authority for the long game also accepts that not every outcome will validate effort immediately. Some decisions reveal their wisdom only over time. Patience becomes an ally. Urgency is applied selectively. Perspective widens. There is also the acceptance that authority will be misunderstood at times. Silence may be misread. Boundaries may be resented. Consistency may be labeled inflexibility by those who benefit from disorder. Enduring authority remains steady through misinterpretation because it is anchored internally. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As everything comes together, The psychology of authority reveals itself as a discipline of being rather than a collection of tactics. It is how you enter spaces, how you hold pressure, how you respond to challenge, how you correct drift, and how you leave systems stronger than you found them. Authority that endures does not rush. It does not posture. It does not fear scrutiny. It welcomes feedback without surrendering direction. It enforces standards without hostility. It carries power without being intoxicated by it. The world responds to this kind of authority because it feels safe and reliable. People organize themselves around it. They bring their best because they are not defending themselves. They grow because expectations are clear and dignity is preserved. As this final chapter closes, let the entire arc settle into a single orientation. Authority is not something to claim, but something to embody. It is built through coherence, reinforced through signals, sustained through psychological understanding, strengthened by restraint, protected through self-awareness, and proven over time. Carry forward the commitment to govern yourself first, to communicate clarity without force, to recognize and manage the shadow, and to build systems that function beyond your presence. Let authority become less about control and more about stewardship. Let it be felt rather than announced, trusted rather than demanded, and remembered not for its volume but for its steadiness. This is the psychology of authority expressed fully, not loud, not fragile, not temporary, but grounded, disciplined, and enduring, shaping environments and people long after the moment of command has passed.